Hey everybody, this is Yvette from the SyFy Sistas, and we got a great special for you this week. We're going to be talking to Matthew Simone. He's a science communicator. He works at the planetarium in Vancouver, and he's also co-host of The First Link, which is on Trek Geeks Network. I met Matthew when we did Discovering Trek for Strange New Worlds, which was outstanding.
It was very good.
You should listen to that.
Awesome.
Well, the reason why we have Matthew here today is because he is the founder of Esther's Echo. And Esther's Echo is just this great charity that he's got going on with a woman. Her name is Esther Kanu. Am I correct?
That's correct. Yes, correct.
And she has the Women in Action Development Project in Sierra Leone. And I believe it's been going on since 1996. So,
yeah.
Right? Yeah. So, Matthew, why don't you tell us a little about it? Oh, I'm sorry. Sure. We also have two other SyFy sisters with me, See? Spotlight, Tamia's here. Hi, Tamia.
Hello, hello.
And Sabrina's here, my roomie. Tamia's my roomie too, right? Yeah. So, Matthew, tell us everything about Esther's Echo.
Yeah. First, thanks for having me. I know it's like we were saying, it's 10 o'clock at night we're recording, and I really appreciate that everyone was willing to come together to talk about this. Esther is a native of Sierra Leone, so she lives there. She's born there. She grew up there, and Sierra Leone went through a super hard time from like the early 90s until the early 2000s. That's the Blood Diamond Civil War. Mm-hmm. That war was depicted to some accuracy in the Blood Diamond movie with Leonardo DiCaprio. It's like the whole year of that war kind of compressed into one film.
Yeah.
But in the middle of that war, people like Esther, these amazing community leaders, they recognized that a lot of the state's infrastructure had been totally destroyed, including the school system. And so you had all these students that were no longer able to go to school, and they were considered a part of a lost generation of people who lost 10 years of schooling. So what Esther did was she started a school for vulnerable women and young girls in the middle of the war. It took teachers that she knew. They found a building and they said, let's continue these students' education. And when the war ended, the government actually reached out to community projects like hers through something called the DDR. It was a demobilization, reintegration, and rehabilitation of young people. And so in that sense, they actually were able to then take students who had been used as child soldiers in the war and actually give them education opportunities. So I met her a number of years later in 2004. I was there as a student with the University of Toronto in my undergrad, and she totally changed like my whole view on how we should even be doing international development and charity work.
Mm-hmm. It's pretty awesome. That's pretty awesome. When you went there, it was something that you went down for like your undergraduate. What was that about? Like how did that work out?
Yeah,
so like an internship, a study abroad. What was that?
Yeah, exactly. It was actually part of my undergrad. So I originally, because of anyone who knows me, they know, especially now that I work at a planetarium, I always wanted to be an astronaut when I was a kid, and I wanted to explore up. And it appeared later on toward the end of high school that like wasn't going to happen because I was terrible at math and I had bad eyesight.
You need that.
All those things you need to be an astronaut. Yeah, right. You need to be able to do math and see properly. So I was like, if I can't explore up, maybe I can explore outward. I think it was just like the desire to want to see as much of the universe as I could. So, and also because I was inspired by shows like Star Trek, is that when you explore places, you should try to do some kind of good where you can for whoever's there. Exactly. And so I found this international development program, and it had a travel component. And I was looking for different organizations that would bring me abroad. You sign up with an organization that you'd want to go with, and then they basically assign you to a country. And so I was assigned to Sierra Leone. So I was there working with another organization when we met Esther. But what I realized was that the amount of money that had been spent to put me, one foreign aid worker, in the field for an entire year would have run Esther's whole school. Like it would have graduated 50 women.
Wow.
And so I started thinking like, why then is it so important for me to even be here? Right? Like why is it that we do charity work this way? That there always has to be sort of like a Westerner create projects often from scratch, when you have these local leaders that have already been doing work on the ground for decades, sometimes have this intricate knowledge of the community, or intimate knowledge of the community and its needs. So we were like, why don't we just help Esther directly? So when I got back, I maintained a relationship with her outside of my placement. And we just started sending her up one-off donations. But then in 2011, we actually founded as a nonprofit organization to echo her work to other communities that otherwise would not know about her.
That's awesome. I remember you telling me about this, and I was like, that is like, I love the way you thought about that, because you're right. It's always, and even when we watch TV and movies, it's always the Westerner who has to go in and save the Africans, save them from themselves.
It sounds like that, like noblesse oblige, idea.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I love that you. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sabrina.
No, everyone knows I'm a CPA, but I work with nonprofits. And so I see this firsthand, large grants going overseas and, doing whatever program. So this is really fascinating to me, because we do have some cases where we do some, what we call microfinancing. Mm-hmm. And so that has really been an interest of mine. And so we've been helping a couple of different organizations that do, like you're saying, direct financing, like cut the middlemen, cut the people, boots on the ground, housing, volunteers, and all this kind of crazy stuff, and just send the money directly. So this really spoke to me. When I heard you speak about this at Vegas, I was just like, oh yeah, we've got to know more about this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it seems like also like a far more efficient way to be doing this. When you think about all the costs that are put into place to bring people over. And this is the other thing too, like in this case, bringing a student, like, what do I know? I don't know anything about, like, I get my learning ability. I get this opportunity to learn. Mm-hmm. But when people like Esther were then turning to me and saying like, okay, well, you're this Westerner with expertise, like, do you have any input on our project? I'm like, no, what do I know? I don't know anything. None. So I'm like, the only reason I'm here is because I've got keys to the organization's pocket. But it's like, it just goes to show. But in addition, like, the resistance that sometimes we'd have when we would promote a project like this, because then they would say, well, where's the Western oversight? And I was like, why do they need oversight? Like, they've been operating through a war. Like, they already know what's going on. So then you look at how much inefficiency is introduced just by the lack of trust, which is inherently racist, in many cases.
Exactly.
It is introduced, and then how much money is wasted just because we don't have the trust and faith in these individuals who have all this knowledge to just do the work that they want to be doing already. They just didn't have the resources to do it.
Right. Yeah, I love that. It was very simple the way you explained it to me. It was what she needs from us is money.
Mm-hmm.
And right. So let's tell me, how do we get her the money? Let's go. Let's see it.
Well, I've over the years, we've been doing these fundraisers and for the organization. And honestly, what would happen is we would get like a certain percentage of what we needed. And when the rest didn't come in, sometimes I would just top it off with myself and the board members. We would just throw in what we needed. But it wasn't exactly like a very sustainable way of doing it. And sometimes it was hard on us, right? And so what I always thought was, is it crazy to think that maybe we could engage nerds, Star Trek community, right? These are people like that, a community that I know well, that believe in a better future. And I thought, you know what, like Esther's Echo itself has really nothing to do with Star Trek, but the underlying philosophy of it and how it came to be probably wouldn't happen unless I were a Star Trek fan, because that's why I wanted to travel around the world and meet other people to begin with. So I thought, maybe we could pitch it to the Star Trek community. So this year, because there's been this growing talk around Trektivism and using fandom for social change, we created a Star Trek community fundraiser for Esther's Echo. And this year, what we did is we pitched it onto GoFundMe. And it's hosted right now also on the trektivism.org website. So that website will probably be hosting other initiatives from other members of the Trek community in the future. But right now, the featured fundraiser is this GoFundMe for Esther. And right now we're at about $7,400 of the $10,000 that we wanted to raise. There's a couple donations that came in outside of the fundraiser as well. So we're probably actually closer to about $8,000. So that's great because about $10,000 is all it takes to cover the major expenses for the school for the year, which really is the rent on the school building that they have. Because we don't have a building for them right now. In the future, that goal is to build them their own building. But right now, covering that rent cost for them offloads so much of the expenses that they have that then when they do bring in their own funding, they can use it on like school equipment, scholarships for students, paying the teachers like a pay, like actual salary so they can like live and stuff.
Yeah.
So if people want to find the GoFundMe right now, it's on trektovism.org, but people can always go and donate at our own website as well at esthersecho.org as well.
We'll have both of those in the notes so that people can see that. Can you also tell me, like, what does who gets the benefits of the school? Who is it? Is it just women? Is it men? Is it boys, girls? Who gets?
It's targeted primarily for women because that's how the organization started. There are some young boys that are in the school as well. In fact, 2 of them that have graduated have now come back as teachers to the school as well, which is awesome. And it is expanded in some areas as well. So there's now a daycare center at the school too.
I was going to ask you that.
Yeah. That was always one of Esther's goals. So we helped in the expansion of the daycare center. They call it the Kitties Foundation. And it's there so that now older women and mothers can bring children and have the children taken care of so that they can now do like either extra courses or start new education. And so that's there too. So we've got young women, we have girls, and we have children, and now we have adults, women who can come in because of the daycare center as well. And then Sabrina, you were mentioning microfinance. So now a new project that's starting is that Esther's daughter, Samuela, has graduated from school in the United States, and she's actually starting now a microfinance project for the graduates of the school who are trying to start their own businesses.
Nice.
So now you've got children right to now entrepreneurs and like the whole way through. So it's like this multi-generational project.
See what happens when you educate women?
I know. The best way to transform the world. It really is
the only way.
Yeah. So Samuel is awesome. And when I met her, she was a kid, right? And now she's a graduate and going to now create this next level onto the program.
So how many students do you have there at one time, maybe?
Typically about 100 at any one time, and it's in a 2-year program. So they're usually graduating. I think on the low end about 30, and on the high end 50 graduates every year.
Okay.
Really cool.
Yeah. So since we've gotten involved, like when I usually count it at 2011, even though we did start sending funds like around 2005. But 2011 is when Esther's Echo actually started. So from that year, we've been helped to graduate over 500 girls from the school, 500 girls and women.
Oh, that's amazing.
That is amazing.
I like it. I love the fact that there's a daycare center.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask you about that because I know, you said that you had a lost generation, that there was during the blood wars, the diamond wars. So I was wondering, what did those girls or those women now that they get to come back, and what do you do with families? Right. Because even, especially even in this country, it's hard to be a professional person to go back to school when you have a family, and daycare centers are huge. When you have a daycare center at work, or when your children are being taken care of, women can rule the world when they know that their children are being taken care of. Yeah. So the fact that there's a daycare center, I think that's gold. And you said that there was is there something that is there like a link to help out with the daycare center? You said something about there's a kitty. It's called
the Kitties Foundation. So basically all the funds we send to the school, I see, this is one of these things that I struggled with, is I don't earmark the funds.
Okay.
Because again, it tends to be kind of like this is a way we draw in donors from like Western like charities and stuff, right? We earmark, we say you bought this one thing or you did this one thing. Mm-hmm. It is good as a promotion, but one of the things that we're trying to promote is that when we send money to Esther, I trust her to use it where she thinks it needs to go. Typically, we always say the big chunk is for rent, but if there's funding that she needs to put in the daycare center, that I tell her, go nuts. We take this money if you want to use it for the daycare center, go ahead. There are a couple times we fundraised for a few other projects. Like when we started the daycare center, we did extra funding for that. And we did funding to buy a plot of land that they're now using to grow crops on. That's an income generating project for the school. And we've bought a plot of land where the new school will go, again, for that big future project. But it's probably going to be a couple years down the road because it's going to be about $50,000 to build a building from scratch.
Capital campaign.
Yeah, that'll be what that will be for. Yeah.
I'm not sure if you said it and I just missed it, but around what age are the kids who are being taught in the school, or age ranges?
Yeah, so with some of the kids that are in the daycare, they're going through courses and stuff too. I couldn't give you like an exact age of the kids, but I get photos of them, so I could take a guess. They're younger, they're looking like 3, 4, 5 years old. The women that are in the classes, they're anywhere from like junior high to high school age. And then afterwards, they have the alumni group, which is they call it the Old Girls Club. And that's the alumni that have graduated. And they have alumni that date back all the way to the 90s, right? So they have a huge age range there with that group as well.
That's really cool.
There's also other advantages too to running a school like this. There are some laws in the country that have come and gone that are awful. For example, one of them was that if you were pregnant, you couldn't go to school at all. Whereas a woman who is pregnant and otherwise may not be able to go to the public school system, they could still come to Esther's school. They would still be welcomed in that case, because it's those kinds of things that she's trying to circumnavigate in the country to continue providing opportunities.
Wow.
Now, is this in Freetown?
That's right. Yeah. There's actually 2 locations now. So the original Women in Action project was in Freetown. There's another one now in a rural community called Port Loco. And it was because they had people that were coming in from surrounding regions that wanted to come to the school and they were at capacity. So they started a satellite location back in 2018. And so that's been operating since then as well. And that's one of the things that that school was able to do because we were offsetting costs on the primary location. So we actually have the 2 sites now.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
This is amazing.
Yeah.
This is really, I'm just, what one person can do when they put their mind to it. This is great. I would love to help this woman out.
Right.
Absolutely.
Now, do the students have to pay to go to school? So
there is a minimal fee. Usually what happens is that it's worked off by taking on catering and tailoring projects within the school. So the part of the education is that people will bring on, they'll learn catering services, they use tailoring, cosmetology, all that kind of stuff. And so what we'll do is if they help to bring in some of the contracts to the school, that gives them their practicum, basically, was what happens. And then they get to keep whatever they work off is the service fees to the school, basically. And then the school that's how the school brings in income as well, as being basically like a collegiate institute, vocational institute that way. And so when everything is good, then it shouldn't work out that the students really need to pay anything at all. And if we're bringing in enough funds, then it goes to scholarship funds. And so it covers fees that way too. And so usually if the students are paying fees, it's because we're in a place where we haven't raised enough funds to cover some of those extra expenses.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
What's it about? And do you know what it's about per year in like American dollars?
It works out pretty. So rent for the school in the year is $6,000 US. That covers their rent. The total operating cost for the school right now is sitting around $15,000 to $20,000 US. Again, if we wanted to build their own building, we're looking at 50. But the students themselves, if they're incurring fees, I think that Esther worked out that per student, I think it's only about $200 for their whole year. But that can be onerous for a student, especially.
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, that, when we say that from an American perspective, it's very different. Looking what that $200 means elsewhere in the world.
Hey, listen, I remember when I was applying to colleges and my mother told me I had $100 to apply to colleges and that was it. There was no more money. So I picked the 5 schools I could go to. It was $25 to apply. And there was the one more college. She was like, I do not have any more money for you. So I get that.
Yeah. So it's what we're trying to do again is just to like alleviate a lot of these burdens around cost, expenses, fees, and just keep everything operating as quickly as possible and as smoothly as possible.
Well, I think we can help you out with that.
I think so too.
I think we have a lot of listeners who really, probably a lot of people in the Trek community have heard of Esther's Echo. I think they've heard. I don't know if they know exactly what it's about. So hopefully, we'll get a lot of our listeners to listen and definitely check you out. I'll make sure that all the social webs. Are you on? Does Esther's Echo have visibility on any of the social webs?
Yeah, it's got a huge presence, but we are on Twitter, so you can find Esther's Echo on Twitter. You can find it on Facebook as well.
Okay.
And we're also on LinkedIn. I don't know if anyone looks at organizations on LinkedIn, but it is
Oh,
there.
I do.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we were fortunate enough that when the GoFundMe campaign came out, that we got this like big splash of visibility right away because it got picked up by a few of the actors. So Kate Mulgrew was tweeting about it, Robert Duncan McNeil, like Nana Visitor, Robert Picardo, some of the crew from from Prodigy were tweeting about it. So it got out there really big. And that was so cool because as a kid, who grew up watching this show, it was like the actors were beaming in real life, like a real away team to help you with your mission. And
because we're Starfleet, and that's what we do.
Starfleet to the core. That's awesome. Yeah. That is awesome. Well, is there anybody else got any more questions?
No, I just, I just think I'm really excited to be able to give a spotlight to this because, what a perfect endeavor for the SyFy Sistas to endorse, right? And with a great ally like yourself. So, and I love the philosophy of people know what they need and people know how to run it. Just give them the money. That's all they need.
Yeah.
They don't need you to come in and tell them how to
She started it through a war.
Right? Like
I don't need
she's fine.
I know.
Like she's good.
She's good.
But I love that. And I love the fact that it's a effort of Black women building something much larger than themselves. I mean, it's not just the idea of the school, but it's also an idea of a sustainable lifehood, right? Like, how do you make this money grow? How do you make this education grow to help you and then therefore help your community even more? So, I mean, everything about it is a beautiful blossom that I'm proud to put my stamp on, to get behind and endorse. Absolutely. So we really appreciate the fact that the work that you've already done with this, but also bringing it to us and really happy to put it on our platform.
Well, I'm really grateful that you're all willing to do that because it's this is something I've always dreamed of doing. There's these two elements of my life, kind of the spacey Star Trekky side, and then, this kind of work. And when I would do it, people would always say, like, that seems really disparate, like that you're doing this kind of charity work. And then on the other side, you're always looking up at space. And I was like, I think it's the same thing.
It's the same thing.
It's the same thing, right?
Same
like,
thing. Yeah.
And if anything we realize by looking up in the stars, like, it's not to forget about our planet. It's to realize, remember just how precious and special it is. Like, there's no other place in space we know of right now where life exists, and I think we take it for granted sometimes. And when I could think of the best way I could make a difference is some, kid from Northwestern Ontario, Canada, who is pretty ignorant about the world for most of their life. And then all of a sudden was thrown in a post-conflict war zone. And then I met this person and I was like, aha, I don't have to figure that out. Someone already has, people have. So, and I was like, but I can create this link now. And you're helping me to do that. So thank you so much for helping me to make that link between her and these communities, because that's what she needed the most. And I thought that's the one thing I at least can help do.
That's awesome. Before we go, I wanted to ask you one question. So your community are called Echoers? You have when
I write my emails out, I've been calling people in Esther. When we write newsletters and I write the blog and I send emails out to donors, I've been referring to everyone as the Echoers, right? Our community of supporters. So yeah,
awesome.
I kind of came up to me one day. No one's ever asked me formally about it, but yeah, that's what I've been using. So yeah,
I'm gonna be an echoer. I'm gonna be an echoer.
Well, thank you, Matthew. Thank you for everything. I appreciate you, bringing this up and that we talked. I love that we talked about it. Thank you for like Tamia said, being an ally, and bringing this to us. Let us know what's going on, what our sisters are doing on the continent. You know, they're doing their thing as usual. You know,
as usual.
As usual. As usual.
It happened for a long time.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But yeah, thanks for bringing, highlighting this and being an advocate for it. It's great. Anything else? Anybody else? All right. So.
Right. Thank you.
You got it. You can find us at SyFysistas.com. That's SyFysas.
I was just getting into the rhythm.
Not how you spell that. Okay. You can find us at SyFysistas.com. That's SyFysistas.com. Join us on the mothership. That's MUTHASHIP. And the SyFy Sisters Book Club, both on Facebook. Download the Trek Geeks Network app, where you can find us and our family of podcasts on the Trek Geeks Network. On Instagram, syfy.sisters. And we are also on the Twitter at SyFy Sisters. Become a patron of SyFy Sisters today at patreon.com/SyFy Sisters. After listening to this podcast, please rate us and write a review. We may just read it on an upcoming episode.
Thanks, Matthew. And we
Thank
got to
you
give a
very
shout out
much.
to the baddest engineer in all the universes. That's Dose the Anonymous one. If you need production skills, engineering skills, he's your man. Dose_the Anonymous_1 on Instagram. Love y'all.
Have a good one. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Matthew. Simone.
Simone.
Mateo.